A rescued baby gorilla takes his first tentative steps into the wild, trembling with fear as he approaches a massive silverback who could crush him with one blow. But what the 400-pound patriarch does next leaves wildlife experts speechless. He gently extends his enormous hand, pulls the orphaned infant close, and begins the most touching adoption ceremony ever captured on film. This incredible display of interspecies compassion would rewrite everything scientists thought they knew about gorilla social behavior.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
But to understand how this incredible moment came to be, we have to go back 18 months earlier to a scene of quiet determination in the heart of Central Africa. Dr. Isabella Martinez, a renowned primatologist with over 15 years of experience in gorilla conservation, was preparing for what would become the most important mission of her career at the Sangha Trinational Park, straddling the borders of Cameroon, Central African Republic, and Republic of Congo. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of one of Africa's last remaining pristine rainforests, illuminating a landscape that had remained virtually unchanged for millennia. Ancient mahogany trees towered over 200 feet high, their massive trunks supporting a complex ecosystem of vines, epiphytes, and countless species that called this Emerald Cathedral home. The air was thick with humidity and alive with the sounds of civilization's forgotten world, the haunting calls of hornbills, the distant chatter of colobus monkeys, and the gentle rustling of leaves that marked the presence of the forest's most magnificent inhabitants. Isabella's research station, a modest collection of eco-friendly buildings constructed from sustainable materials, had become a beacon of hope for gorilla conservation in a region increasingly threatened by poaching, logging, and human encroachment. Her team of international researchers and local guides worked tirelessly to document and protect the 3 distinct gorilla families that had made this particular section of forest their ancestral home. For months, their work had followed predictable rhythms, tracking gorilla movements, collecting behavioral data, and maintaining the delicate balance between scientific observation and minimal human interference that defined ethical wildlife research. The gorilla families had grown accustomed to the respectful presence of Isabella's team, allowing unprecedented insights into their complex social structures and emotional intelligence. Everything about this morning suggested another routine day of data collection and peaceful observation. The weather was perfect for tracking, the gorilla families were active and healthy, and the forest seemed to radiate the timeless tranquility that had drawn Isabella to this remote corner of the world. None of them could have predicted that this day would mark the beginning of a rescue mission that would challenge everything they thought they knew about gorilla compassion.
Isabella had dedicated her life to understanding the remarkable creatures that shared 98% of human DNA, yet remained one of nature's most misunderstood species. At 35, her weathered hands and sun-lined face told the story of countless hours spent in some of the world's most remote wilderness areas. But her eyes still sparkled with the passion that had driven her from a comfortable university position to the challenging realities of field research in Central Africa. Her current focus was the Bwindi family, a group of 12 mountain gorillas led by Makemba, a magnificent silverback whose intelligence and gentle leadership had made him legendary among local communities. Standing nearly 6 feet tall and weighing over 400 pounds, Makemba possessed the physical power to tear a human apart, yet his interactions with Isabella's research team demonstrated a level of emotional sophistication that challenged conventional understanding of animal cognition. The family structure was complex and beautiful. Nyota, Makemba's primary mate, served as the group's matriarch, her keen intelligence evident in how she guided the younger females and made crucial decisions about foraging and territory. Django and Kala, 2 adolescent males, provided energy and playfulness to the group while learning the complex social dynamics that would prepare them for eventual independence. Most precious to the group were the three young ones. Asha, a curious 2-year-old female who had become Isabella's favorite subject for behavioral studies, Bomba, an energetic male infant whose acrobatic antics provided endless entertainment, and Zuberi, the newest addition at just 8 months old, whose presence brought out the protective instincts in every family member. What made this particular gorilla family extraordinary wasn't just their size or the remarkable tolerance they showed toward human observers, but their documented history of complex emotional behaviors that suggested cognitive abilities far beyond what science had previously attributed to great apes. Isabella had recorded instances of apparent grief, celebration, problem-solving, and even what appeared to be altruistic behavior that extended beyond typical family bonds. These magnificent creatures had become more than research subjects to Isabella. They were individuals with personalities, relationships, and emotional lives that demanded respect and protection from a world that too often saw them as mere animals rather than distant cousins deserving of dignity.
But the tranquil world of Isabella's research was about to be shattered by a darkness that had been growing in the shadows of the conservation world for years. International wildlife trafficking had evolved into a sophisticated criminal enterprise worth billions of dollars annually, and gorilla infants represented some of the most valuable prizes in this brutal trade. Their intelligence, rarity, and resemblance to human children made them highly sought after by wealthy collectors who saw exotic animals as status symbols rather than sentient beings. The criminal network operating in Central Africa was more organized and ruthless than most people realized. Led by Viktor Kozlov, a former military contractor turned wildlife trafficker, the syndicate had developed sophisticated methods for acquiring rare animals while avoiding law enforcement. Their operations combined high-tech surveillance, corrupt local officials, and military-grade weapons to create an almost unstoppable machine of exploitation. What made this particular criminal enterprise especially dangerous was their intelligence-gathering capabilities. For months, they had been monitoring Isabella's research station using hidden cameras and local informants, documenting the movements and behaviors of the Bwindi family with the precision of a military operation. They knew each gorilla's individual patterns, the research team's daily routines, and most importantly, they had identified little Zuberi as their primary target. Infant gorillas commanded premium prices on the black market, but acquiring them required killing the protective adults who would die before allowing harm to come to their young. Kozlov's team had developed brutal tactics for gorilla captures that involved using tranquilizer darts to incapacitate adults, then taking the confused and terrified infants while the family lay helpless. The trauma inflicted on both the captured infants and surviving family members was incalculable. The syndicate's presence in the region had grown increasingly bold as corruption weakened local law enforcement. Ranger stations reported equipment theft, mysterious helicopter flights at night, and the disappearance of several Rangers' employees who had asked too many questions about unusual activities in remote areas. Unknown to Isabella and her team, their peaceful research camp was being watched through high-powered scopes by men who saw the gentle Bwindi family not as remarkable creatures deserving protection, but as valuable merchandise waiting to be harvested.
The attack came at dawn when the forest was still wrapped in morning mist and the Bwindi family was at their most vulnerable. Kozlov's team moved with military precision, using night vision equipment and silenced weapons to approach the gorilla's sleeping area undetected. They had timed their operation perfectly, striking during the brief window when the family was still drowsy and their natural alertness was at its lowest point. Isabella's research camp was positioned nearly half a mile from the gorilla family's current location, far enough to avoid interfering with natural behaviors but close enough to respond to emergencies. The first sign that something was wrong came from her motion sensor cameras, which detected unusual heat signatures moving through the forest in coordinated patterns that didn't match any known wildlife behavior. By the time Isabella and her team realized what was happening, the tranquilizer darts had already found their marks. Makemba, despite his massive size and strength, succumbed to the powerful sedatives within minutes. Nyocha's desperate attempts to protect her family ended when a second dart dropped her beside her fallen mate.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The other adults fell one by one, their confused and terrified roars echoing through the forest as the criminal team methodically executed their plan. 8-month-old Zuberi, too young to understand the horror unfolding around him, clung desperately to his unconscious mother as strange men in military fatigues approached with nets and restraining equipment. His terrified cries pierced the morning air, a sound of pure innocence confronting incomprehensible cruelty that would haunt everyone who heard it. Isabella arrived at the scene just as Kozlov's men were loading the traumatized infant into a reinforced transport cage. Her heart shattered as she witnessed little Zuberi's desperate attempts to reach his unconscious family, his small hands grasping through the cage bars toward the motionless forms of the only security he had ever known. The poachers had achieved their objective with ruthless efficiency, but they hadn't counted on one factor in their carefully planned operation, a determined primatologist whose love for these magnificent creatures would drive her to risk everything to save an innocent life from a fate worse than death.
What happened next would define Isabella's character and change the course of multiple lives forever. As Kozlov's team prepared to extract Zuberi from the forest, Isabella made a decision that defied every protocol of scientific research and personal safety. Armed with nothing but her intimate knowledge of the terrain and an unbreakable determination to save the infant gorilla, she began a pursuit that would pit her against a criminal organization with military resources and no moral boundaries. The chase through the dense rainforest became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Isabella used her years of field experience to track the poacher's movements, following broken vegetation, disturbed soil, and the faint sound of Zuberi's distressed calls echoing through the canopy. Her advantage lay in knowing every trail, stream, and hiding place within a 50-mile radius, knowledge that even the most sophisticated military planning couldn't replicate. For 3 days, Isabella shadowed the criminal team as they moved toward their extraction point near the Sangha River. She survived on emergency rations and stream water, sleeping in brief intervals while maintaining surveillance on the group that held Zuberi captive. Each night, she could hear the baby gorilla's heartbreaking cries as he called for his family. Sounds that strengthened her resolve and fueled her determination to attempt what seemed impossible. The opportunity came when Kozlov's team made camp on the third night, confident that they had evaded any pursuit and were within hours of reaching their extraction helicopter. Their arrogance became their weakness as they relaxed security protocols, posting only one guard while the others celebrated their successful operation with alcohol and loud conversation. Isabella struck during the darkest hour before dawn, using a combination of scientific knowledge and desperate courage that surprised even herself. She created a diversion using animal calls she had perfected during years of guerrilla research, drawing the guard away from Zuberi's cage while she approached from the opposite direction. The infant gorilla recognized her immediately, his terrified cries softening to whimpers of hope as familiar hands worked frantically to free him from his mechanical prison. The rescue that followed would test every limit of human endurance and determination.
The moment Isabella freed Zuberi from his cage, their real ordeal began. The discovery of the empty transport container triggered an immediate manhunt as Kozlov's men realized their valuable prize had escaped. Armed with night vision equipment, GPS tracking devices, and the ruthless determination of criminals who had lost a fortune, they began a systematic search of the surrounding forest that would test every survival skill Isabella had learned during her years in the African wilderness. Carrying a traumatized 8-month-old gorilla through dense rainforest while evading armed pursuers created challenges that pushed Isabella beyond her physical and emotional limits. Zuberi, though small,
weighed nearly 30 pounds, and clung to her with desperate strength that made movement difficult and silent travel nearly impossible. His continued distressed vocalizations, while heartbreaking, also served as acoustic beacons that helped their pursuers track their movements through the thick vegetation. The criminal team employed increasingly sophisticated tactics to recapture their escaped prize. They split into multiple groups to cover more territory, used thermal imaging drones to scan the canopy, and established roadblocks at every possible exit point from the forest. Their radio communications, intercepted by Isabella's emergency equipment, revealed the true scope of their operation and the international network of buyers waiting for Zuberi's arrival. Isabella's advantage lay in her intimate knowledge of the forest's hidden paths and secret refuges, but this was offset by Zuberi's increasing weakness and dehydration. The infant gorilla, separated from his mother's milk and stressed beyond endurance, was beginning to show signs of severe trauma that threatened his survival even if they managed to escape their pursuers. The most harrowing moments came when Isabella had to make impossible choices between Zuberi's immediate needs and their long-term survival. His hunger required feeding, but stopping to care for him increased their risk of capture. His cries demanded comfort, but silencing him might mean the difference between freedom and falling back into the hands of criminals who would show no mercy to either of them. As their second day of flight through the forest continued, both Isabella and Zuberi approached the breaking point, where courage alone might not be enough to overcome the overwhelming odds stacked against them.
By the third day of their desperate flight, Isabella faced the crushing realization that they might not survive their escape attempt. Zuberi had stopped eating entirely, his small body racked by dehydration and trauma-induced stress that no amount of human care seemed able to alleviate. His once bright eyes had become dull and listless, and his grip on Isabella's clothing had weakened to the point where she feared he might simply let go and give up entirely. The criminal pursuit had intensified with military precision. Kozlov's team had brought in additional resources, including tracking dogs and a helicopter that swept the forest canopy with thermal imaging equipment. Isabella could hear the mechanical whir of rotor blades growing closer with each passing hour, systematically eliminating her hiding places one by one until she was forced into increasingly dangerous terrain near the forest's edge. Isabella's own physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. 3 days without proper food or sleep, combined with the constant stress of carrying Zuberi while navigating treacherous forest paths, had pushed her body beyond its breaking point. Her hands shook from exhaustion, her vision blurred from dehydration, and her legs trembled with each step as they struggled up increasingly steep terrain toward what she hoped might be their salvation. The most heartbreaking moment came when Zuberi stopped responding to Isabella's attempts at comfort. The infant gorilla lay motionless in her arms, his breathing shallow and irregular, his small body no longer fighting the trauma that threatened to claim his young life. Isabella realized with growing horror that she might be watching him die in her arms, that all her efforts and sacrifices might not be enough to save the innocent life she had risked everything to protect. As darkness fell on their third night, Isabella found herself trapped on a rocky outcropping with nowhere left to run. The sounds of their pursuers grew louder from multiple directions, and the helicopter's searchlight swept dangerously close to their position. In that moment of absolute despair, when capture seemed inevitable and Zuberi's survival hung by the thinnest thread, Isabella prepared herself for the possibility that their story might end in tragedy despite all her determination. Just when all hope seemed lost, salvation arrived from an unexpected direction.
The thunderous roar of military helicopters filled the air as international authorities launched a coordinated raid on Kozlov's operation. Isabella's research team had successfully contacted Interpol, and elite anti-poaching units surrounded the forest in a precision strike. In the chaos of the raid, Isabella reached the predetermined extraction point where Dr. James Okafor, a wildlife veterinarian, waited with emergency medical supplies. Zuberi's condition was critical but treatable. Under expert care, intravenous fluids restored his hydration, while Isabella's constant presence provided the psychological comfort necessary for his recovery. But the greatest challenge remained ahead. Zuberi could not stay in human care without losing his wild instincts. The Bwindi family had recovered from their trauma, but would they accept their youngest member back after his extended absence and the human scent that now marked him as different? The question that would define Zuberi's future was whether his family would welcome him home or reject him as a stranger.
The reunion that followed defied every expectation and rewrote scientific understanding of gorilla emotional intelligence. When Isabella carefully carried Zuberi back to his family's territory, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Makemba, the massive silverback who could have easily rejected the infant as contaminated by human contact, instead performed an act of acceptance that left researchers speechless. The patriarch approached slowly, his enormous frame moving with deliberate gentleness as he recognized the small gorilla he had mourned as lost forever. What happened next challenged every assumption about animal cognition and emotional capacity. Makemba extended his massive hand, gently touching Zuberi's face in a gesture of recognition and welcome that seemed almost human in its tenderness. Nyota's reaction was even more extraordinary. The grieving mother, who had been listless and depressed since losing her infant, immediately gathered Zuberi to her chest, examining every inch of his small body before beginning the grooming behaviors that would restore his scent and reintegrate him into the family structure. The entire Bwindi family participated in what could only be described as a celebration, with each member taking turns touching and welcoming the returned infant. Isabella, witnessing this remarkable display of forgiveness and acceptance, realized she had documented something unprecedented in wildlife research, proof that love transcends even the most fundamental survival instincts. This extraordinary rescue revealed profound truths about the bonds that connect all living beings. Isabella's courage demonstrated that compassion knows no boundaries, that the human heart can drive us to risk everything for those who cannot speak for themselves. Her 3-day ordeal through dangerous terrain showed that love manifests not in grand gestures, but in the quiet determination to protect innocence from cruelty. Makemba's incredible welcome proved that forgiveness and acceptance exist throughout the animal kingdom in ways that humble our understanding of emotional intelligence. His gentle recognition of Zuberi, despite the infant's contamination with human scent, challenged scientific assumptions about gorilla social behavior and revealed depths of compassion that mirror our own capacity for unconditional love. Most remarkably, this story demonstrates that healing is possible even after the deepest trauma. Zuberi's successful reintegration into his family showed that broken bonds can be restored when love refuses to surrender to circumstances. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't measured in headlines or awards, but in the simple triumph of returning lost children to loving arms, whether human or otherwise. In a world often divided by differences, we witnessed the universal language of family, the courage to rescue, the wisdom to forgive, and the strength to heal.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.